Hello and welcome inside a special edition of the Scores Table. Brian Haenchen, Danny Riego here with you. We're going to jump right into the topic, as I'm sure you've seen from the description and the reason why you clicked on this show. We're here to talk with South Bend Washington coach Steve Reynolds following his team's 100-0 victory over Gary Lighthouse, just the seventh shutout win for any IHSAA girls basketball team this century, and the first one to reach 100-0. That's the overview view. Steve, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll start with the same question that I asked when you came on the show, in just kind of a lighthearted attempt to wade into this topic. And that's, what's your life been like on social media for the past 24 to 48 hours?
Yeah, it's been wild. I've obviously been observant. I've never shied away from looking at things on social media and so on, because it's here. Social media is here, right? So whether you're at the game or not, you have something to say, and you have to weigh those things. You have to help your kids with it. Your administration's going to hear it. But it's been, it's been what it is. It's been a thing for sure.
Let's dive into it. And I guess the best place to start is, how did this game come to be? How did 4A South Bend Washington come to play 2A Gary Lighthouse, a team that hadn't won a game in 28 tries or something?
Yeah. So when our conference disbanded, right? We're down to 8 teams. We lost some other games out of contract. We were pining for games, right? And probably right up until a couple of weeks, we kind of put out a feeler and it was like, look, we need to get more games. So one of the things that is not out, we've actually picked up really, really tough games. Like, we picked up Valpo, we picked up Lawrence Central, we picked up Lawrence North. We try to load our schedule. So now, for the most part, I've been pretty diligent about who we play. If you know us over the years, we'll play anybody. We'll play the number one team from Michigan, Illinois, Indiana. It doesn't matter. We'll play anybody. And so we're very competitive in that matter. So long story short, Gary Lighthouse gets the feeler, and they reached out and was like, hey, we'll play you guys. And when people do that to me, my first initial thought isn't, well, how good are they or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, they want the smoke. Let's do this. And they had switched over to being like an academy. And in my world, like, when you're an academy or like a private school, it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, they must be bringing something, and we just took the game. We still right now are looking for games. So we signed the contract or what have you. And honestly, man, it was literally 30 minutes before the game. We get a text and it says, hey, just kind of realized how good you guys were and was hoping we could play a JV team. Okay, problem. We have 800 kids enrolled, and we, in our school, even though it says we're 4A, we got bumped. None of our other teams are 4A. But we don't have a JV team. We were not able to put one together. So we're like, oh, shoot. So we literally went back to the drawing board, brought all the kids in and said, hey, we're not sure how competitive this game is going to be, but this is what we're going to do. And we made a plan, and just kind of went from there.
So to confirm, Gary Lighthouse is the one who responded to your feeler, correct?
Yes.
This wasn't you guys reaching out to them.
Yes. Yep. It was a feeler out to everybody, all IHSA schools. And like I said, some people like Valpo responded, Lawrence Central, those guys, Gary, and they're kind of all thrown in a vacuum. And we took what we had, literally took whatever we had, we just took it.
And so you haven't really researched them up until you're going into that game. So you're going into that game kind of blind, correct?
Oh yeah. No, listen, all week we were going hard. Like a lot of people have never been to South Bend Washington practice, but we're putting those kids through hell. Like every game, and we're coming in thinking like we're on 110 mentally. I got kids that are going to school. I got freshmen. I run the gamut. I got 12 girls in the program. And when we get to a game, traditionally that's just when we let loose. And yeah, that's kind of how it went.
Out-of-state teams, I saw what Austin Hough wrote in his story and your remarks to him. I'd like for you to explain it to us and just the challenges and I guess just how you see playing out-of-state teams and how that view has changed maybe over the course of this season.
In short, I think we get penalized for playing out-of-state teams when we're trying to find competition. Because over the years, again, we've just tried to find the best competition. So if you look at our schedule the last 5 or 6 years, even before had a winning record, we went down to Ben Davis. We took a team that would probably be equivalent to most JVs, and we went and played Warren Central the year they won it. Like, we've always going to go try to play the best and find the games. Now, over time, I felt that when it comes to things like rankings, and I know rankings aren't everything, but when we play out of state, we played Detroit Edison one year. They were number one team. They had a over 60 game winning streak. We played Bolingbrook. It was one of the top teams in the country that year. Like, we've gone to Ohio and played their top teams. And so this year, our mindset sort of was, okay, well, let's just try to stay in Indiana and wait for people to play us. But we contacted every team up north that we could. Nobody wanted to play us, literally, like no one. And we're already coming to Indy 3 times, 2.5, 3 hours. And I know some of those teams would play us down there. We went and reached out to the best, and they accepted. But I don't want to keep going down there. I don't want to drive 3 hours for every home game. We're a public school. We're not. Our funding isn't great. And, I'm sorry.
It's got to be expensive too. Loading up the bus, paying the drivers, and all that.
And it's taxing. It is taxing. It is a mental grind. So we try to get as many local things as possible. So it's a perfect storm, like I told you guys earlier. It's really unfortunate that this is what's garnering the attention, but we really are in a pickle because of the success we've had and so on.
Hey, Steve, thanks for being on, man.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people know that we have a relationship, and so this one is very sensitive for me, but from one coach to another, I think we've all been on both sides of these things.
Yeah.
And this story for me is, I think there's two sides to it. I think there's the scheduling of the game, and then there's the game itself.
Yep.
Can you contextualize the game? Because as a coach, when we've been on both sides of this, when the final's 100-0, at one point in time it was 80-0, and one point in time it was 50-0, and at one point in time it was 10-0.
Yeah.
Can you contextualize what the game flow was like, what you were running, what your kids were like, what it was like in the gym, unless you saw it or were there?
Yeah.
I just think you see the score, and then I think you automatically jump to conclusions as to what that was like. Can you just talk about your assessment of what the building was like?
Yeah, and listen, and I understand, right? Like, we're in a social media generation, our culture. We look at stuff, we make comments, we're emotional about it, and so on, right? But I'll take you right through it. We get there, like I said, I'll go from the phone call. 30 minutes before the game, we're like, oh, shoot. Okay, what are we going to do? We took our kids literally off the court, brought them in, and went over our philosophy about these types of games, all right? And we told them, look, you're going to be respectful. You're going to have sportsmanship, those kind of things. And we bring them in and say, hey, this is how we're going to go about it. I got 12 kids. All of you are going to play equally, which they did. My starters, my Division I players, and my snotty-nosed freshmen, right? They all played the same amount of minutes, right? But one thing we're trying to build in our kids is a mindset, right? Like, when you're out there, you're going to go do the best that you can, and you're going to play hard. You owe that to the game. In fact, most people would say you owe that to the other team. Now, if you come to a South Bend, Washington game, we're pressing you for the most part for 32 minutes. We don't care who you are. In this case, we didn't press one time. Not one time. I met with Coach Matthews, who is a sweet woman. I love her to death. And before the game, we had a talk. And when I tell you, I very rarely do this, but I asked her, how do you want this to play out? And she goes to me, listen, we're on your schedule. This is unfortunate. And I know you got kids who are trying to be all state and those kind of things. And like, you guys got to do what you got to do. She said, the only thing I ask is that you run the clock the whole second half. I said, deal. And I said, I'll go one step further. We're not going to press you, and I'm going to coach these kids through it. I'm sorry, not coach the kids. I'm going to help manage the game, all right? And we agreed. We shook hands. We talked, and then we got going. So those of you who watched the film, obviously you probably won't have audio, but we started our starters, and we told them, listen, let's go. All right, you guys are going to play very much. Let's get up and down. I said that we're not going to hawk them. We're not going to press at all. We're going to sit in this 1-3-1, and I want you guys to play because I also don't want them to get hurt. You guys know if you don't play how you practice, that's when you get hurt. And so, or things like that. And so if we got a steal, we took the layup, right? We jogged back. They came up and, and this is no slight to them, but there were literally times like they threw us the ball. But I remember one time, one of the girls was so surprised that the ball came to her. It hit her in the chest. She let it bounce because at this point we were telling them not to steal the ball. And her instincts just picked up. Like the ball's laying there. Nobody's getting it. And so she picks it up, throws it to her teammate, gets the layup. We're just like, it was dumbing down every instinct that we were building into them. All right. So first half, I think it's like 66-0. We go inside and we say, listen, guys, we'll pull it back, even more. Right. We're telling kids, don't steal the ball. Don't block the ball. Our kids were literally helping them. Hey, you got a V cut. Hey, you got to get open, or like literally, like all this is going on out on the court, and all I'm doing is trying to manage it. We're subbing in, we're making sure the kids aren't disrespectful. They're not, giggling and all that stuff. I mean, like the crowd was very kind of like, oh my God, what is going on? But to me, and this is again, I'm not being haughty at all. When I tell you the score it could have been much, much worse, guys. Like, I feel like given the circumstances, we did everything we could to. What gets lost in this is that, yes, you do have to consider the other team, but you have parents and you have kids there. Like we had one of our kids score their first points ever in varsity. Right? We celebrated like this was a moment for her. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't in spite of Gary Lighthouse. This was this girl, scored her first varsity basket. She had people there in the stands and so on. Like, so there was a lot going on. But when I tell you, man, the IHSA has asked for both of our games. We sent them the Goshen game, which was 94-13. We sent them the Gary Lighthouse game. And I'm telling you, I can lay my head on my pillow knowing that we did everything we could to preserve the integrity of competition in the IHSAA sport and be sportsmen in those situations.
Hang on a second. So the IHSAA they contacted you and asked you for the game?
Yeah. Yep. We sent them both full games.
So their office asked for it.
I'm sorry?
Their office requested footage?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know for what purpose, or what just to make sure that it was on the up and up, or what?
It has to be. I've never had it happen to me before.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like personally, I've been kicked in my 11 years, 60, 70, 80 points. I mean, like I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything like this. And if I could tell you a story really quick. Well, one year we had flu come ravage us. Like it was the only 2 games I've ever missed in my coaching career. My wife had to coach for me. And we happened to be playing Warren Central and Ben Davis that day in the holiday tournament down in Indy. We had some disciplinary issues, and we took our girls down there, and we were outmatched. And both coaches were very upset because they felt like they wasted a game, and they let us know. I can't believe you did this. I can't this, that, and this is awful. And I mean, it wasn't the best experience for us. But as competitors, my wife, we're kind of cut from the same cloth. Actually, she's actually a little more competitive than I am. But she apologized to them. She said, listen, we know we didn't bring our best. We don't want you to change anything. If you press, you press. Whatever. We got to get better. And those early years, before I start winning state championships and all that kind of stuff, that's how we rolled. And guys, when I tell you, nobody came to our aid. I mean, we were getting it handed to us. And there was no paper articles. There was nothing. We just put our heads down and we kept grinding and grinding and grinding. And the reason I also bring that up is because a lot of people won't know, but if you watch the tape, you'll see it. I got the girls together at the end of the game. I knew what was going on, right? I knew that had to be tough. I would venture to say I don't think they had anybody travel with them. Like the Miss Coach Matthews, like I said, sweetheart, she was coaching her butt off. I want that to be said. From the jump to the end, she was coaching her butt off. Like it was literally amazing. And those girls on that court, they didn't pout like all those stereotypes about those kind of schools and public and Gary schools and all that. Man, it was not on display. Those girls did the best they could. They were trying to learn. This was the first game of the year. Like, kudos to them. I brought them over with the coach, and I encouraged them. I told them that Coach Matthews was not only going to make them better basketball players, but they're going to make them better women. You know, and I had some more words of encouragement. Coach Matthews was brought to tears. We gave her a hug. We hugged the girls. My coaching staff came over and let them know, listen, if there's anything we can do to help. Like and again, I've always done this. Like I've always done this. All the way back to the Riley game, all the way back to teams. When this has happened, we have, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, we have gone the extra mile to let people know, number one, we're going to compete every night, every single night, because that's the mentality I have to build into my demographic of girls. But number two, we're going to love on you too. Like, you get hurt, I'm the first one out on the court. You need to get to that bench, I'm going to pick you up. I don't care what team you're on. So all those kinds of things were happening, man. And so when people, just by face value, just throw out, whatever they want to say about me and my girls, man, all I say to them is you had to be there. You had to be there because, at least from what I can tell, no one who was there felt like it was an egregious thing. Like, if you were there, I believe you understood.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the score is obviously jarring whenever you see 100.
It is, no doubt.
I think the question for me, not negative or positive, was just confusion as to how the game came to be in the first place, which I think is reasonable. I think you'd have probably the same reaction if you just, saw that. If you saw Lawrence Central playing Gary Lighthouse or a city school out here, I think, same kind of thing. And to contextualize what Steve was talking about from that 2017-18 season, that was December 27th, 29th, at Ben Davis, lost 63-12, 73-29, then to Warren. And then you turn around 2 days later and you lose to Tindley down here, 103-41.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
to your point, it's you've been on the other end of these losses as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll say this, if you allow me to, like, the women's game, at least up north, I'll speak for up north, and I believe it's around the state, maybe around the country. We're suffering. Like, the girls aren't playing basketball. They're doing number one, they're playing volleyball. I love volleyball. All right. So a lot of kids are playing volleyball. But you know what? They're doing TikToks. Up here where I live, they're out in the street and so on. Like, but the other side of it is a competition. I am trying to also, there's a dichotomy here. I'm trying to preserve the nature of the game in that, hey, we're going to compete. All right. I owe it to my girls who are trying to play college. That's one of the staples in our program. I'm trying to give them an avenue. And you guys know as well as I know, when you get to college, you can't take the bad games off. You can't, if you're South Carolina, you can't play a lesser team and be like, you know what, let's pull back. No, that game is going to be 120-30. And if you don't play like that, you get penalized, you get benched, you have to run, you lose your starting spot, and so on. So all things have to be considered. All things have to be considered. And I do have a little bit different philosophy than maybe a Penn High School. But I'm going to tell you what, we're not Penn High School. I'm sorry, we're not. We're South Bend, Washington. We have 800 kids in our enrollment. We're trying to find games. We're trying to be competitive. I'm trying to appease my parents, and I'm trying to help some kids get better and some kids get to the next level. Like, there's a lot going on, And so that's why I appreciate platforms like you guys have given me, with Indy Star, Brian, Danny, you're my guy. Obviously, I love you. But I'm grateful to be able to tell the story. I just wish people were there. I wish people were there. So
it's nice
Steve,
that you said something nice to Danny, because that's very rare. It's usually the opposite. I get so many complaints about Riego, so it's nice that he has you in his corner.
Steve, what about, can you talk about, I don't know if national media's picked it up, but how's Kira? How's Raya? How's Monique? And
Danny,
you've got kids that will likely.
Before we get to that, Danny, let's. I had a couple more questions about the game, then we can transition to some other stuff.
Man,
okay.
Steve, let the journalists take it, right, Steve?
Hey, I'm good. I'm here. I'm at home. My wife's with me and my dog. I'm feeling good.
Handling starters in that game, how did you mentioned changing the philosophy, the approach at halftime? How did you handle the starters over the course of a game like that?
It was 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off. I have 12 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So my starters played the first 4 minutes. They knew it, then you're coming out. We early on, we took the fast break layup early on in the first half. Second half, we brought it back out every time. Brought it back out because we're still trying to learn our plays. There's a lot of stuff. So we ran through everything. We tried to use it again also to benefit us, and that we're 2 games in, and our games coming up, we're playing top-ranked teams. So we need to know our stuff. So we tried to run everything that we possibly could, and try to get something out of it. Mm-hmm. So, they came out. If they had a fast break, I told them the word we use is easy. You're here, so yelling easy, easy, easy. They know to pull it back out, set it back up, try to do the best we can.
With this, I think a big broader issue, and I don't know, is mercy rule. I see the positives that you avoid situations like this. I see the downside because, like you mentioned, you're trying to get kids better. And with that, you maybe lose opportunities for girls who don't get to play varsity very often, a chance to get to play and maybe even score a basket, which is huge for them. Yeah. And so awesome. I'm curious, though, what is your stance on it, having been on both sides of these types of blowout losses? Should there be a cap on games? Like once it hits 50, instead of doing a running clock or whatever, you just say, all right, that's enough? Or how would you approach that? What do you think of that? I'm curious.
Well, my philosophy is this. Where else does that happen?
Softball, right?
No. I'm talking about in the real world.
Oh, sure.
We're talking about a game, right? Mm-hmm. For instance, if I'm sitting outside of an office for a job interview, I'm not going to pull back just because I saw 8 people go in there before me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go in there and give the best interview I possibly could, no matter what, right? If somebody offers me extra hours overtime, I'm not going to turn them down because I have 40 already. I have to be on the grind. And again, this is a little different, but people know I have a certain demographic of kids, right? I'm very involved in my community. I'm very involved in the mental state of my families and my kids. And there's certain things they have to learn they will only learn from basketball. And one of them is competition, right? We live in America. If you don't put the metal to the pedal, you're going to fall behind. Somebody's going to catch you lacking, and you're going to lose out on a job, on an opportunity, or whatever that is, right? But yes, do you also have to be a human being and still be considerate and so on? Absolutely. But we're teaching both of those things. And I think it's hard for people to get their mind around it when you're looking at 100-0 score. But if you know me, if you know my students and my staff and my administration, you know our hearts and how we are doing the best we can with the situation that we have.
Gary Reynolds, class of 25, Monique Mitchell, class of 25, Raya Wilson, class of 25, not to mention kids like Lowe. I mean, you've got a stable of Division I kids that will wear Indiana All-Star jerseys likely. You talked about their psyche. What were those team meetings like? I mean, I'm sure they're getting reached out by media also, or are they not? Or are they talking to the media? Yeah. What's their take on it? What's your locker room like now?
I mean, these kids are 15, 16, 17 years old, right? Girls, okay? And social media is their world, right? And so we reached out on our group chat and we say, hey guys, listen, I know that people are reaching out and saying stuff, and I told them, don't feel the need to comment. Don't feel the need to say anything. When that game was over, we're thinking about Valpo. That's where we're at, right? But we get sucked into this vacuum. Everybody wants to comment and all that kind of stuff. I decline most of them. And to be honest, Danny, you're a big reason why I'm even on here right now. To be very honest, this is my last interview. I'm done with it, But I wanted to do this with you guys, for you guys, that kind of thing. And anyway, caveat. But back to the question. Like we've moved on. Like we've moved on. Like it is a part of who we are. This is not the first time this has happened. But we do teach the girls through it, and we have conversations and so on. But they know first and foremost, we're gonna compete. We owe the game our best, and we owe the team our best. They've heard that 1,000 times. And in that, yes, we still do try to remain cordial and know there's a human side to this as well.
It's got to be tough too to shelter the girls from a lot of the BS that goes on social media. I mean, I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it, even just in the comments. Let alone, I mean, we're not living in their mentions on Instagram or Twitter, and it's so easy for people, especially in these instances, to lose sight of the fact that these are teenage girls that they're attacking.
Yeah, but Brian, listen, just like okay, like you're saying a mouthful right now, because we don't shelter them.
Right.
We let them. You have to go into life 100% full throttle, believing in your mission, your core values, and your principles on how to get those things. We're not sheltering them from social media. We're South Bend, Washington. Where are you going to get sheltered from that? No, we're going to lean in 100% like we do in the game, just like the game, socially, on the court, athletically, in our community, all the volunteer work. When we're working, when we're at the food bank, when we're cleaning up the grounds at our school, we're going at that 100% too. Like we're working. We're not standing around talking, waiting for the hour to pass. We're going 100% wherever our 2 feet are. And so when it comes to media, we talk about that too. We get right on it, and we try to help them with what they should and shouldn't say and those kind of things. But hey, we're not pulling back in any area of life, man. Nope.
How have the girls handled how they respond? I'm sure you've had a chance to talk to them. How are they doing with some of that backlash, some of the BS that's come out over the past 48 hours?
Yeah. I mean, some people are irritated. Some people take it with a grain of salt. Our seniors, though, they've been here before. They've been here before. And this is what they know. They trust me. They love me. We've built a great relationship. They know they were prepared for the moment. They went into the moment. We did the absolute best we could. So when we left, we left. We shot over to Adams all together to watch Adams. Then we went to the Penn and Valpo game. Like we moved on. Like it was just a part of life for us. And again, we do realize it is jarring, right? 100-0, whatever, right? But listen, we didn't score the last 4 minutes. No, sorry. We scored 2 points the last 4 minutes. And we were the ones that suggested in the last minute. We didn't even finish the game. I asked her, hey, is it okay if we just go ahead and call it? We had the ball, and she said, yeah, that's fine. But as a competitor, Coach Matthews didn't want to. She wanted to finish the game. I admire that so much. But again, if you weren't there, you wouldn't know.
So what led to your decision, following up on that, calling the game in the last minute? What led to your decision to do that, and what the timing of it too? I'm curious to hear your timing of that decision on your end.
Well, just thinking through everything, right? Like I said, I wanted all 12 of our girls to get a chance to play because, listen, honestly, we have a 7 or 8 man rotation. Some of these girls are not going to get to play. I cannot not let them play in that game, right? Just because we're up. Their families are there. One of our girls had 15 people there, right? And what am I going to tell her? Hey, don't shoot the ball. Don't lay it up. Are you kidding? Like, and this girl scored her first points. It was amazing, And so, again, like the timing, it had nothing to do with timing. It's just when you're in a game like that, you just start kind of feeling and sensing stuff. I read the room very well. In fact, I'll tell you this. It was 98-0, right? And there was a call that could have went either way, all right? But it kept us and this girl from scoring her first points, okay? So the crowd is going crazy. Like, they're complaining, and I'm cringing. I'm like, oh no. Like, we should not be acting like this. Like, it's not, let's just get this game over with, right? Like, I'm literally feeling sick. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, so we're hanging on 100 or 98. There's like 6 minutes left. And, and again, as a community figure, as a coach, I have to manage all of this. I have to go to my parents, calm down, calm down. I have to go turn around to my kids, literally turn around to my kids and say, no, I'm sorry, I called a timeout. And I brought them together and I said, you know what, we're not going to act like this, guys. We're not going to complain about calls and all this other kind of stuff, right? I'm constantly fathering them, teaching them, and so on. So there's all that's going on, man. Like, I could literally be on here another half hour. I see our counter. I could be on here another half hour and tell you the little details that we went through to try to do the best we could with the situation.
For sure. On a different and lighter note, Steve, as we try to get you out of here, going to be down here in Indianapolis at the end of the month. You have Lawrence Central, a game that I would like to think that I've spoken to existence both on social media and in writing. I don't want to take credit.
I'll take it. I'll give credit all the time. You can have it, Brian. We're good.
I tell you what, man, I am so fired up for that game. Like, that is going to be phenomenal. The level of talent on that game is going to be exceptional.
Yeah.
And then you come back down here a week later for Lawrence North at the Sneakers for Santa Classic.
Yeah, we coming down there.
Yeah, and Lawrence North, I mean, that's going to be a great game too. A rematch from the summer, which I know, went heavily your way, but Lawrence North is going to be anxious to get some revenge for you guys.
Yep.
A chance at another really staple big-time win.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Listen, we love you guys. I love the show. I listen to it. And actually, you guys help us help understand what's going on down there, But listen, we're not afraid to play anybody. We'll play anybody. We don't care. Like, and a lot of teams didn't want to come to us this year, so we came to you guys. So it's hard to plan a road, travel 2.5 hours with our budget or whatever. We're gonna come down there, play the best we can. We're gonna leave and keep it moving. So, thanks for having us. I hope you guys are able to come. Hopefully, we can keep it competitive. Those kind of things. We love the Lampley's. We think Lawrence Central is doing a fantastic job. Lawrence North, we know they weren't at full tilt this summer, but we know how good they are, even though they're on 2 right now, but they're extremely good. And that's why we scheduled them.
Great stuff. Well, Steve, thank you again so much for joining us, man. I'm looking forward to seeing you here in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Thank you guys, man.
Take care.
Good seeing you, man.
All right. Appreciate it.
Steve Reynolds, as I make us equal size there. Steve Reynolds, the South Bend Washington girls basketball coach, joining us. We're going to have Austin Hough. He's been hanging out in the back room. He's going to talk with us. Austin talked with Steve night of. Danny, I'll toss to you first, just your general thoughts and takeaways from our chat with Steve.
I think it's important to have context. For me, it's, in the heat of the game, again, all coaches, we can all say it, right? We've been on both sides of that. We've been on both sides of that. But as the game is going on, you're faced with decisions. I mean, as a coach, everything that's going on, right? I mean, especially in a game like that, for example, what the score is, sometimes, who scored and who hasn't scored. He kind of referenced a lot of those things. I think, interestingly, South Bend, Washington, this will probably galvanize that team. You see those shirts and the hashtags like, South Bend, Washington versus everybody. It really is South Bend, Washington versus everybody now. I mean, I think they got a lot of negative pub, and I'm thankful that Steve got in. I guess got on here to contextualize some things, but I think that probably is going to bring that locker room, closer together. I think that's my first take. I as a coach, I just don't. Both sides to that are horrible. Like, losing 100-0 is horrible. But I can also tell you, winning to 100-0 is horrible.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's horrible as a coach. You don't know what to do. And so from that standpoint, I empathize with Steve. I very much do. And without being the guy that's standing up on the sidelines, making the substitutions, making the calls, I think it's difficult to have a hard line opinion on it.
It's not fun. I remember covering a football game in South Dakota that ended 107-0, and I talked to the winning coach the next day, and he was just gutted. Ironically, also his name was Steve, but he was just dead. and it's not to be celebrated. And that was a playoff game. Like, they were moving on in the playoffs, and it wasn't a celebration. It was just like, that sucked. Like, that's not fun to be a part of, because it's a no-win situation either way, especially in the age of social media. And, I mean, I know Steve addressed it. We asked him about it directly and just how you handle it. I mean, no matter how you slice that stuff, it eats at you after a while. And these are kids. And I think that's important to remember, too, through all this. I tell you, Danny, the two things, one of them you picked up on right away was the IHSAA asking for the tape. I thought that was interesting. I understand why they did it. I'm not criticizing or complaining. I thought that was interesting, though. And then also of how this game came up, where it was Gary Lighthouse that asked South Bend Washington to play. And that might have been in Austin's reporting, and I just missed it. But I didn't realize that. That was very interesting to me.
It was really interesting. Like, it's the Zapruder film, and it was like, being subpoenaed. I don't know how the IHSAA governs over their teams and their coaches and the IBCA. I have no idea, or if the IHSAA is even, what the level of connections the IHSAA has with the IBCA. But I would be interested. I mean, Hank, I don't know, maybe dive into your connections. I would like to see what they're looking for and what would happen if they see something, on there. But now you're asking to draw lines, right? I mean, so what is the difference between a 100-0 game and a 70-0 game? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe the third digit. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's score. I mean, that's jaw dropping to see that. I mean, I saw that, and I forget who. I think Austin tweeted it, and I saw it as I was waiting for Weibo to go through their medal ceremonies on Saturday at Worthen Arena up in Ball State, and it just, your jaw drops. It's just like, what the hell? And I think you were probably one of the first people I texted, you and Sable and Courtney, and just like, hey guys,
yeah,
is this real? Am I hallucinating? It's been a long day already. But yeah, it's crazy, and it is interesting. And he brought up a point, and obviously he has a different view on it than me, who's kind of objective, and people who are, other people, haters, whatever, what have you. Point is, he brings up a very interesting point in that Washington's been on this side of things too, where maybe not 100-0 bad, but they were getting pounded pretty healthily by teams like Ben Davis, by an eventual state champion in Warren Central, and they come down here and lose to Tindley, Indianapolis, Tindley too. And that's an interesting perspective, having been on both sides of the issue. I don't know. I guess just the sustained success makes it a little bit different. I don't know. What do you make of it?
I think there's just a lot of, history and subtext to this that, quite frankly, I don't want to touch, and sure. Steve didn't want to touch it either. But I do think that because it was South Bend, Washington, and because it was Steve Reynolds, and maybe some of the recent history, I do think that it maybe blew up a little bit more. And that's why I reached out to Steve. I just wanted to give him an opportunity. And he texted right away. Like, I think it's really cool. I'm thinking, this is going to be national media. I mean, he's super relevant. I mean, so not only is he the coach of South Bend, Washington, not only is he a past state champ as a coach, he also fathers 3 kids on the girls' side, Mila, Amaya, and Kira, his daughters, that will go down in IHSA history as some of the best players to ever play in Indiana high school basketball. His boy, Steven Reynolds, I think it's the third, I think is projected to be a pro. And those are just his kids. I mean, not to mention Raya Wilson and Monique Mitchell and some of these other kids that he's had in the past. Yeah. But my point to all of that is, like, I mean, he writes for LBI, which is Lady Baller Insider, a guy up in Michigan named Jason Wilkins started that brand, and it's a very big brand on the girls basketball side. Like, this is super relevant news. When it was right after it happened, Hank, I probably got a dozen. A dozen texts with the link to the article, like literally within the first 30 minutes of Austin's tweet going out.
Yeah.
Probably got it sent to me a dozen times.
A couple things that stand out, and I remembered my opinion or my thoughts on it, and I think I mentioned it to Steve. I think what was so jarring when you saw it is the fact that they're playing 2A Gary Lighthouse. Like, if it's 100-0 game and it's like a I don't want to pick on any specific school, but let's say that it's a 4A school that's down on its luck, or even just a rebuilding school that's normally good. Maybe it doesn't get as much attention, but the fact that it's a 2A school out of Gary, I think, has part of it. And then two, I mean, we've seen the posts, and I'm going to add in Austin here just so I don't forget, but one of the social media posts that him and I were talking about was one where it kind of like played it up and had some funny little emojis in there. And it just, I mean, that's one that I got texted about and just kind of like, it's not great. It's not Steve's fault by any means. And it's not the person running that account. I mean, they're trying to get clicks. That's the name of the game. You got to get clicks however you can get it. But I think that when that's like the tone that's being set by a third party like that, like, I don't know that it's so good. I wonder what the backlash looks like. It probably still sucks, is social media, but if it's just Austin's story. And that's how I transition now to Austin Hough joining the conversation to talk about it. Austin had the story, the tweet. He had everything. From the Steve Reynolds or from the South Bend Washington 100-0 game. So Austin, I'll open it up to you, and I'm fascinated to hear your thoughts as we just kind of have a little conversation here for 15 minutes.
First up, hello, Brian. Hello, Danny, or Hank, as you like to be called. Good evening, afternoon, morning, whatever you're listening to this, good, whatever. Obviously my Saturday got a little more interesting with 100-0. I was not at the game, obviously, because I knew what was going to happen. I knew Washington was going to win by a lot. I didn't think it was going to be 100-0. I mean, I think the sentiments, you guys have had, I echo a lot. Where like, why was this game happening in the first place? Like, I get the fact you're desperate and trying to fill out your schedule. You want to add games and make sure that you're playing, whatever the 24 max you're allowed. But at a certain point, there has to be do we really need this? Like, do we really need to do this? Like, Washington was going to gain nothing. They gained a negative, actually, out of it, probably. Like, that's what, there was no upside to scheduling this game. I don't care how desperate you are in needing this game and needing a game to play. Like, it would have been better just to do an inter-squad scrimmage against each other in practice. And, heck, even invite fans to it if you want, make it like a food drive or whatever, something to like, you didn't need to play this game. And that was my biggest thought throughout the whole thing. The game happened, of course. And so you think, okay, like, was there maybe not a better way to go about it? But like, I kept on thinking, like, if this game just ends 72-4 or 78, even 78-0 or something, like, it still could have been 0. But if they had maybe not scored 100, it would have probably been like, okay, like, this is bad, but we didn't, like, whatever. Like, people would have been like upset, but they would have just kind of scoffed it off, like, whatever. But I don't know. There's something about seeing 100-0 that just like triggers a lot of these like discussions about why was this played? Do we even need this game? Like, could it have been better? Like, could they have, just played 4 corners offense in the second half and won 73-0 or 74-0? Like, and I get it. Like, and I see both sides of it. Like, I see Steve's side. I listened to most of his conversation here, what you guys had with him. And obviously I talked to him on Saturday when the game ended. And I can understand, like, look, he puts his players through, he said, like, puts his players through hell in practice. And he wants them to go into a game and play as if they're in a game, like, as much as possible. Obviously they made adjustments to the quality of the opponent during the game Saturday. But, in some ways, like, was it like unpreventable to get to 100, I guess, there's so many different like layers and levels and it just feels all kind of like, like crappy. Like, you don't want to talk about it. It's just kind of annoying and it's like frustrating. And it just feels like it could have been all avoided if this, like, Washington was like, look, I know we're looking for games, but we can't do this. Like, we can't do this. Like, even if Gary Lighthouse had been like, I don't know, even like 4-13 last year, like, okay, like, they have a couple, at least one player maybe that could be, whatever, but they haven't won a game since 2021. Like, there's just no reason for it. There's just no reason to play that game. You could have done so many other different things.
And Austin, I don't know if you were on for this, but Steve said that Gary reached out to them. Steve saw the Academy moniker on there and is just like, okay, cool. This sounds great. And then they get to the day of the game and it's just like, oh, this is what
I did hear that Gary had reached out. And I know that, again, like, you look at some of the games that are on Washington's schedule this year, There's some new teams out there they haven't played, like East Chicago Central and some of these other region teams that, that the region Northwest Indiana that they haven't played, before. And again, like I wrote about in my story, like part of it was the NIC shifted from 12 to 8 schools. So they lost 4 games automatically just because the conference shrunk. 3 left and South Bend Clay closed. From what I had talked to with Steve, they were going to do the Lake Central tournament, which was this past Saturday. They've done that the last couple of years, but they were trying to do their own like round robin thing on their own instead. And it just kind of fell through. So they got left, empty handed on this schedule. We're like, look, if they had gone to Lake Central, like how they had the last couple of years, played Lake Central and played McCutcheon, or even Marquette Catholic, who was that, the 1A runner up that held their own against 2 4A schools on Saturday. Like no one, that would have been fine. Like no one would have batted an eye. Like, so they got stuck, in a sense with their schedule. And obviously a lot of teams already have their schedules set. So if you lose something late, it's kind of hard to fill a gap with, you're going to be desperate to take whoever. And if Gary reached out and was like, yes, let's do this, then, in a sense, it's hard to say no, but also like you have to look at the situation and be like, look, I'd rather just have the Saturday off. Brian, I don't know if you heard me say this earlier, but yeah, Danny, I told Danny, like, you should just play an inter squad scrimmage or something on that Saturday. Like, get everyone in at, noon, and play each other. I know they only have 12 players total, but like something that would have been more productive than this. It would have been more productive than this. You would have gained something. Don't do like a normal practice. Do a legit 5-on-5 for whatever, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and be out of there in an hour and a half total, and like get on with your Saturday. So
they don't play. So Austin, they don't play Warsaw. They don't play Penn. They play
Penn's in their conference. So they do the only like good 4A team up here, like in this area that they don't play is Warsaw this year. That's the only one that they actually added Northridge this year. They hadn't played Northridge for a while, and they added a game. They're playing mid-December. Penn is in their conference, so they will play Penn December 6th. So they do have a couple like, bigger games up here, like as far as like the Michiana area. I don't remember offhand all their Fort Wayne based games, but like they do play Northridge, they do play Penn, both in December. So they will get some tests there. Warsaw was the only one that I saw from the like top, northern Indiana teams that are not on the schedule.
Has there been any reaction from other coaches in the area? Has Krebs said anything? I
haven't seen Lenny Krebs or like, Doug Springer or anything. Like no one's texted. They haven't texted me at least. Maybe they've been, sitting at the dinner table mumbling some things, but as I'll do, I'm sure everyone has an opinion on what happened. I did get a couple text messages from coaches, mostly off the record stuff. Let's just say that. And, there's a lot of like frustration, of course, with just the whole thing, the whole situation. It just feels like, again, like it sounds like a broken record here, but it just feels like it could have been avoided. We didn't have to do this. And it would have saved everyone a lot of headaches and discussion about what is fairer and like how they should have gone about it better. Like I said, like Valparaiso, I think won a game earlier this week, like 70-2, up here. And like, yeah, you see the score and it's bad, but you kind of like roll your eyes and move on. 100-0 was like a triggering moment for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, for whatever reason, fair or not, 100-0, I would argue is a little bit different than
like even if they just let Gary. I know Gary was bad, but like even if they just let him score like 2 points, 100-2, even wouldn't have been. I mean, it would have been an outcry, but it wouldn't have been. I don't know. I think the reaction just optically, like we're simple-minded people. Our brains operate like that. Where like you see 100-0, you're like, what the heck just happened here? So
Valpo's 70-2 win, by the way, was over Class A Bauman Academy.
Yeah, Bowman Academy. Yeah. So it's a very similar game, and you didn't see anyone really overly freaking out about that, right? Like it happened, it's bad, but again, that's why I think if like Washington had won even just 70-0 or 75-0, like yes, bad, but like you kind of roll your eyes and you move on. Like okay, whatever. They didn't play their starters the second half, or or the last 3 quarters, whatever. Like so, it's just. 100 looks really bad, like 100 points. And it's the second time it's happened for Washington now in 3 seasons, right? They did it to Riley, who they have to play. It's a conference game. And so, there's all this debate about like, how do you avoid this? And how do you try to not have this happen? And then it happens again. And it's like, okay, like what the heck's going on? Like, so.
A question for both of you. If it happened in the Indianapolis area, I assume that it's probably something that I would cover so that colors it a little differently. Let's say that it happens in Southeast Indiana with a big school down there, or I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but let's say like one of those schools or a Evansville school goes out and wins game 100-0 or Cass or something like that. Do you think that it takes off and catches fire the way that South Bend, Washington does? Let's say similar circumstances. Do you think it takes off the same way? Danny, I'll start with you.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I don't know that. I think there would have been a lot of people asking a lot of questions. I do think that Steve, and I say this, I think because of the recent history in how Steve has been portrayed in the girls basketball community, I do think that it was a little bit more, I think it was a little bit more of a story because it was Steve. To answer your question before we get Austin's answer, if it happened on the South Side and somebody won 100-0? Yeah, I think it would have been a story, but I do not think that the coach maybe would have been painted in such a negative light the way that maybe Steve has.
By social media, you mean?
Yes. And not social media. Look, social media, Hank, is public, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so the minute that you pressed send on X or post something or a screenshot or whatever, okay, it's for everybody to see. Austin mentioned it. It's the back channel texting, I think, is probably the more telling stuff, okay? Would I have gotten the texts with the same context if it had happened in Southwest Indiana versus Steve Reynolds? I don't know that I would have. I'm being honest. I know that's a probably very unpopular opinion right now, but I don't think that I would have. Austin, what say you?
Yeah, I think it still would have been a story because 100-0 just, pops off the page. Like I've said, 5 times now, but I think it was kind of a perfect storm in that regard of it's South Bend, Washington. They've been in the, they are one of the more historic programs in the state the last 20 years. They are, especially the last 5, right? They've been one of the top programs. It's not like they're just another 4A team. Like this is a 4A team that went up because they won 3A state. They were state runner-up, and they've had, that 2022 state championship team will have had 6 Division I players on it. That is a crazy number to comprehend. It's not just that they're good; they're like a generational run going on right now.
Generational team,
winning. Right. The only thing they need is one more state title to really kind of punctuate this whole thing. And maybe they'll get it this year. Who knows? But it's a perfect storm of they have all these Division I players. They've been in the spotlight for years. Steven Reynolds has by default been in the spotlight for years for that as well, right? And whether you have an opinion of him or not, wrong or right, wrong or indifferent, right? They've just kind of become a lightning rod type of program with, how they, they've been really good and all, like I said, Division I, they're all going to Purdue basically, and so that adds to it too. And yeah, if this had happened, if an Evansville, Memorial had beaten, whoever 100-0, would it have been a big story? Would it have been a story? Yes. Would it have been as big of a story? Probably not. And, it's part of it too is the context and the recent history where they did beat South Bend Riley 110-10, in 2022. They even beat Goshen 93-14 on Thursday. They've won some really, really, really big games. Their 2 wins this year are by combined 170 points or whatever. So I think that is part of it. Yeah, it's crazy. I know you put that in the numbers. 179 points. They've won their 2 games by combined 179 so far.
That's like a football team's entire season.
That's more points than the points they got in the voting coaches poll this week. So when you look at this in the bottom there. Yeah. So yeah, I just think it was a perfect storm because then again, it's it goes back to why why the game happened. Like all of that factors into why this became a bigger thing. Is because of they're playing a 2A team that hasn't won in 3 years. They are this 4A juggernaut that has been a juggernaut for the last 5-6 years. Why is this happening? Oh, and then they beat them 100-0. Like they couldn't even do the service of like beating them 70-0 or 65-0. Like I think it was just this combination of everything going into play that made this massive and bigger than if it had been a quote unquote normal 100-0 win.
Mm-hmm.
Austin, was it a home and away?
I don't know. I think it was a one-shot thing. I think Washington's going back. They did not play last year. I would be stunned at this point if Washington's like, yeah, we'll go to Gary Lighthouse, or Gary Lighthouse would welcome him at this point.
Right.
Although I will say, I mean, look, Washington, they graduate the 3 seniors this year, right? The 3 Division I kids. I know they got talented players below them, but maybe Lighthouse would score 4 points next year, like 6 points. Like, it would be a little more competitive by default, I think.
Did you talk to the athletic department at South Bend, Washington? Does he have their support?
I did not talk to Garland Hudson, their AD, since this happened. Look, I think they've been in lockstep together as a unit the last however many years, trying to schedule these games. I would be stunned, if Washington people in the building didn't just gauging by social media, like the people that are, from Washington, whether it be coaches or parents or family, like they're in support of Steve and the win, and they felt like they were, as classy as they could be, given the difference in play skill level. So they don't feel like they're in the wrong. It's more of the outside people that are like, bro, like 100-0. Like you couldn't have done anything to make this better. Like nothing. Like, so
I'll end it on. I'll not end it on this. If you guys want to keep going, we can. But Danny, I'm sure this speaks to you as a coach, and Steve mentioned it, and Austin, I think we've talked about it. But it's not like you can do the 4 corners thing, but that's kind of disrespectful to the other team too. Where it's like you guys are so bad, we're just going to quit trying completely, and it's a disservice to your own team, even if you do. Because on the one hand, I think that you can't leave the starters in, and if I'm being honest, even just like the 4-minute halves, like quarters, I get it, and I think that it's good that Steve did that. I maybe even would have just cut it down to 3 quarters and just let the 4th go to the JV kids and freshmen. But again, he's got a 10 bench. Either way, point is, you can't put in the JV kids and say, don't try. Like, this is their one moment. They might not get another moment. I mean, they will, but they may not, in theory, get another opportunity like this. A home game, et cetera, to get some significant, meaningful minutes. Like, that's important to them, and it's a disservice to them. For your starters at the beginning of the game when it's getting out of hand, you can't say, pull it back, don't try hard, because then that's how bad habits develop. And you got to stay sharp because you got a solid competitive Valpo team coming up, and it's still early in the season, so you can't really mess around, I guess. I don't know. Danny, I'm curious your thoughts on the whole, who should have pulled it back or taken their foot out the pedal, that sort of thing. I didn't mean to mock that the way that I did, but, a little mocking.
You're mocking the people who say those things. You're not mocking,
the idea of it.
Yeah.
So a lot of times before a basketball game, and more recently, I've probably been on the Steve side more than I've been on the Gary Lighthouse side. Okay. And that's just, my history in coaching. A lot of times the coach will come over and they'll say, hey, listen, play hard. I don't care if you press. We're trying to get better. We're trying to provide this experience for the girls. We're doing this, but man, like just do so in this way. Mm-hmm. It sounded like those conversations took place. I mean, it just did. And without being in the gym and without being able to contextualize things, this wasn't one coach standing over saying, I'm going to hang 100 on these people.
Right.
Okay.
It wasn't vindictive.
Yes, it didn't seem like that. And one of my friends posted some video from the film, and I have not, and by choice, I didn't want to watch it before we did this interview. I'll watch it now, but I did see some clips. These kids on Gary Lighthouse they looked like they were playing basketball for the first time. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that like it was probably impossible. Like Austin, you had mentioned, hey, let them score. They probably couldn't get a bucket. I mean, they probably couldn't make an uncontested right-handed layup.
It was essentially a college team against a middle school team. Yeah. That's what it was. I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah, I have thoughts, but I don't want to say it unfairly, and it's not against either side, but it's just unfair without hearing.
I didn't mean to cut you off there, Danny, by the way. If you had something else you wanted to mention on that,
I don't.
Yeah, it's just kind of where we're at. I mean, it's what it was. I mean, literally, Washington has 3 Division I kids, and they will probably have a couple more kids that play college basketball. Maybe not, Purdue, Winthrop, and Akron level, but they are talented enough to play college basketball later in life. And so it was basically a college team against the Gary Lighthouse that only played 9 games last year, right? Like, they're about as rebuilding of a program as you possibly can be. And they are just trying to learn the fundamentals almost of basketball, let alone how to run a pick and roll, so they're trying to make sure they can get the ball up across half court. They only averaged 9 points a game last year. The whole thing was, again, broken record. It could have been avoided. We didn't need this.
That's what I get to too. And that's what bothers me about all this, that this game was scheduled in the first place. And it's
pool. A lot of AAU tournaments are done pool play Saturday, bracket play Sunday. And schedules for AAU tournaments typically finalize on Wednesday and Thursday of the week of. And the reason why they don't finalize till that late is because the first draft of the schedule typically comes out on a Monday, maybe a Tuesday. And then there are several requests that come in from teams that don't want to play other teams. So I'll get a text saying, hey, this team doesn't want to play you. They're outmanned. They don't have their best player. There's no way they can play with you. And then that team gets voluntarily removed from the pool. So there is a little bit of precedent to what Hank is talking about. Gary Lighthouse, they likely could have ducked the game. I do think that that's an interesting thing. And I'm going to go back on something that I had said just to kind of make a turn here. A lot of people will say, myself included, more than once in the last 63 minutes, said we've been on both sides of this. I've been a basketball coach for 20 years. I've never been up 98-0 in a basketball game. I've never been down 98-0 for a basketball game, ever. So if you do want to say, Austin and Hank, as you did, that there is a difference between winning 79-6 and 100-0, Steve has experienced something now in his coaching career that most coaches probably haven't experienced. So there isn't precedent for something like this as to how you're supposed to do it. And so I think that's an important distinction too, because, you can say I've been a coach for 20 years and I've been on both sides of it. No, you haven't. You have never been up 98-0 with a wide open layup. Do you take it?
Right. And again, if you don't, it's kind of like showing the middle finger to the other team, where it's like, you're so garbage, we're not even gonna, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a slippery slope in a sticky situation.
It's an impossible balancing act that Steve had on Saturday. It's impossible. If they don't actively try to score, and you only win 55-0, Gary Lighthouse is like, hey, why do we even play this game if you weren't even going to play us actually, right? But then if you win 100-0 like you did, it's like everyone's like, what the heck? Why did you guys score 100? And it's like, well, you watch the film, it's hard to avoid the wide open layups. My only thing is I don't think that the D1 kids should have played after the first quarter. I know he was trying to play 4-on, 4-off, each quarter to get them minutes, but there was zero reason for Kira Reynolds, Monique Mitchell, Raya Wilson to see the court after the first quarter. Just play the other 9. I know you'll have to, one person will probably have to be on. You can make the numbers work. Those 3 should not have seen a competitive minute the rest of the game. That's just my opinion.
I can't disagree, but again, without being there, so we played in a national tournament 4 months ago, and I think we were up 51 at one point. Okay. And in AAU, you play later that afternoon. Okay. So the schedule flow is the same. Okay. You'll play maybe a lesser opponent and then a better opponent. The second game that we had played that day, in the round of 16 was against a team that had 5-star athletes, that was really good, multiple Division I players up and down. That game ended up going into overtime. So I think what Steve would tell you, without putting words in his mouth and without speaking for him, I'll do it anyways. Hank had mentioned like he probably just wanted to keep the axe sharp, I guess. I mean, look, Valpo has Lily Barnes, and Valpo is going to be somebody that's going to stand in their way of getting South down 31 to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And so I do think that they're putting a lot in that basketball game. So I think my thoughts would be, at some point you're probably going to sit your D1 kids in that 51-point game. There's no question that some of the more impactful players on our basketball team did sit, but when, I mean, I don't know that there's a steadfast rule that says when the score gets to this, that and cross-sport analogy is horrible, right? I mean, but this is the same thing as passing up 9 touchdowns. You're going for the 10th. Are you just running fullback dives the rest of the way? Well, then what's the fullback dive doing for you to prepare for the following week's football game? So I think that's what Steve would probably argue. And that's what a lot of coaches that are on Steve's side would argue, is that, hey man, we got Valpo coming up and it doesn't do any good for our kids to sit there and right, wrong, whether you agree with that, disagree with that, or whatever. That's probably where Steve's going to come from on that. Because again, I know Steve, okay, and I know that he elicits certain reactions, okay. But I know that he didn't go into that game saying I'm gonna hang a hundy. I know he didn't.
I think they only got to 100 by default, almost. Like they if they could have, they would have, but it was almost impossible to, like, the spirit of the game to not, it would have been this awful dribbling out the clock for the last 16 minutes, 24 minutes of the game if they weren't going to get to 100. That's what it sounds like. So I believe him when he says they could have scored 300. I do. I believe
I do too.
And obviously, no coach is going to score 300 points, 300-0. Like, we all have a line, at least that in that regard. So that's nice. Could you imagine it though? Holy cow, 300-0. That would have been
Austin. You'd have enough clicks to like sustain an entire small city.
We would have been able to power the west side of South Bend for a week with all those clicks. Yeah.
That's how the clicks work. They for the community. The 300 points thing, I'm glad, Austin, I think that you gave a good context in your story. I was glad to hear Steve say it so that you can kind of hear the vocal tones, because you can't really portray that. He wasn't being braggadocious or anything like that, which I'm sure people on social media are like, oh, look at this jerk. He was being sincere. Exactly. And I'm glad that he said that and that we had a chance. People had a chance, hopefully, to hear the tone and understand that, he's being sincere in that. And it wasn't, like we said, I don't think, like Austin said, just to bring us home, I don't think that the intent was there. It's just it's an unfortunate situation all around, man. And it's too bad that it happened. I'm glad that it happened earlier in the season rather than later, because there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff that happened the time that this posts, and even Saturday when Homestead is playing at Pike, and then you got Columbia City at Fishers, and some other big games coming up here. So there's going to be plenty to wash this out of the system once this podcast goes up and
it's a great week one storyline. It's a great volleyball state basketball weekend.
Yeah, it's basketball season now.
I saw that. I was like,
we don't got 100-0 basketball. Okay, yeah, fine.
What would have been fun for you, Austin, is if your volleyball team would have gone through and made it to Muncie for you, because I think they would have been playing in that match.
It would have been a 4:30, the 3A game. It would have been the 3A game at like 4:30, right when Washington finished up. I missed the end of Miami Georgia Tech to talk to Steve and read about this game. So
that's how you know, Steve. That's how you know you're important, is when Austin is willing to put down the football just to come talk to you.
One final note too. I mean, I think as the season progresses too, South Bend Washington has a ton of talent. Okay, this is not the first basketball game that they're going to be up by 1 million in. Okay, so what happens when they run and jump in the half court up by 30? They grab a steal and take the layup. Steve going to get, is he going to get killed? Are there going to be murmurs running all the way across? Are people going to tweet like, oh, you're South Bend Washington? I mean, so, Yeah, I think the sooner that everybody can move on, I think the better. I think Steve declining comment. I'm sure there's national media reaching out to him.
I am surprised. Austin, have you seen your story picked up anywhere?
IndyStar.com. But other than that, no. No. I haven't checked that much. But yeah, thanks for the free 20,000 plus page views on that. That's very ideal.
It's all
I got a job. I got a job for at least another week. So
and then this podcast. I mean, all of us are going to be rolling in the clicks.
Yeah,
they're going to be like gold coins.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any to national media. I mean, one guy from The Athletic quote tweeted it. He covers the Colts down there, who used to work in the region. So,
James.
Yeah, James. Yeah, Romeoville kid. Shout out Romeoville. I grew up about 30 minutes from Romeoville. So shout out Southwest Illinois suburbs, Chicagoland suburbs. But yeah. So other than that, it was pretty tame. Obviously, the local and the statewide interest. I'm sure there were people that were sharing it across the state and whatnot, but I haven't personally had anyone, reach out being like, hey, can we, or I didn't see anyone famous, tweet out my link. So, by the time 7:30 hit up here, Notre Dame football was on. So we all shifted our, energy to that. So,
yeah. Well, this pod came to you, Austin, and that's what counts.
Yeah, that's all that matters, man. I love talking to you guys.
This is what they call the pinnacle, my friend.
Next time we get 100-0, let me hop on and talk about it again. So
literally the only other time we're gonna have you on. Anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's fine with me. It's fine with me.
So much for watching. It was a joke, by the way. We love Austin. Thank you so much for watching. We thank Steve Reynolds for hopping on to talk with us. We thank Austin Hough for taking time out of his day to talk to us. For Danny Riego and Brian Haenchen, we'll be back with you, I don't know, at some point either this week or next week. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.